All right, today we're going to talk about one-point perspective scenarios where you're seeing an interior space like the one I have pulled up on the screen here. The kind of cool thing about this image that I've found, I've totally borrowed it off the internet, is that what you're seeing right now is a 3D render of like a hospital hallway, but then I'm going to flip the image over and you can see more of a kind of like a computer-generated line drawing for the render. And that line drawing is much more similar to what we're going to be making, right, and replicating. So keep that in mind, that when you're looking at reality, on one hand, we're kind of trying to strip it down to its main components to where we can then turn it into a good line drawing or shaded drawing, whatever it happens to be. So we're kind of always looking with a keen eye for that under structure that kind of hides under everything. Keep in mind, for me, these are the four corners of my image right here, this interior rectangle, and those correspond to the corners of the image that you see of this hospital hallway. For you guys, this ratio, it's the same 3:4 ratio as your sketchbooks and your larger paper. So that'll make it easier. You're gonna be using a full-size sheet of either the sketchbook or the 18:24, both would work ratio-wise. So the hardest thing when you're working on a hallway image, you're looking at your source material and you're thinking, oh my goodness, there's so much going on. Where do I even begin? I don't even know how to start a perspective drawing. I mean, Taylor told me some things about perspective, but where do I go, right? There's so much. So the first thing, strip away the details and think about big elements to the image. So the absolute first thing I think about actually is way in the distance on the back wall. There's a wall with double doors, and I'm going to try to locate that in my image. It feels like if I was breaking this image down into thirds, it sure seems to me, and I'm just going to lightly draw those thirds lines. It feels like that double door is on the left third somewhere on my back wall. And I see an awful lot of floor going back to that wall and an awful lot of ceiling coming down. So as far as the height of that wall, it feels somewhere toward the middle of my page. Now, we're never going to get totally accurate when you're going for more of a drawing by feeling or just using our best approximations, but I think it's important that we try to get close to accurate. So this is the beginnings of what I think my very far back wall with the double doors, where that would be. And check out just how small that is in my greater scheme of the overall image. That's really important to get this feeling of extreme depth. Again, don't know if this is perfect, but my best guess so far. So I'm going to guesstimate somewhere around there. Next things I'm going to think about are just, let's see, from the very bottom of my page to the bottom of this wall, I'm going to check my measurement compared to the top. They're almost the same. I might be a little bottom heavy. And now I'm just checking that against reality. And it does seem as if I see just a little bit more of the floor than I do the ceiling, but not very much more. So that might be a sign that I'm just going to drop this down a smidge. Okay, good things to check. So it's pretty well centered in the image, in the original image. So that's a great place to start, because now what I have is that very back wall. I have it nice and small on my page, because that leaves plenty of room for eventually what's going to be floor and the side walls. So next thing to think about would be where my vanishing point might be. And remember, a vanishing point is going to fall on your eye level. Now, a really good way for those of you, looking at that image on the screen of our this hospital hallway would be to hold your pencils up and measure your angles and see where it seems that one side, where the floor meets the wall over here, the line, and where the floor meets the wall in this direction, where those are going to come up and imagine the imaginary line that comes and connects in the middle is going to be where our vanishing point is. So I'm going to take my pencil and kind of try to measure that for myself. And it sure seems to be falling within the double doors and kind of high up on those double doors. So let me show you something real quick. When I say the double doors stand on this back wall kind of centered, and they take up a good chunk of the wall. So something like around here. Where I'm starting to see my two lines converge sure seems like, just me guesstimating it. Now I'll pull this up on the computer and find a much better approximation, but it seems like it's going to be somewhere around here, roughly speaking. And that makes sense, because that's probably about 5 feet high off the ground if this is like a 10-foot ceiling, and that's a typical human height, right? So the way we would check this is I'm going to draw an imaginary line that goes from my new vanishing point. Now, I'm not sure if this is correct yet, so I just want to have a very loose approximation. It's going to go down from that vanishing point through the bottom left corner of this wall, and it's just going to carry on and keep going until it runs somewhere off the page, and it runs off right around here. A great way to check is in our original image, is that where the bottom wall seems to run off the page, and we're close at the very least. So now another good double check. And I'm just, excuse me, approximating these straight lines. I'll bring out the ruler in a minute, but this is a good way to just check and see. So same sort of thing here, from my vanishing point through my bottom right corner, carrying on until it rolls off the bottom edge of the page. And you know what? I'm pretty happy with that. Where it rolls off, it's maybe a quarter of the way into the image, and that seems close to what I see on the computer screen here. So good approximation. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here, and I'm going to roll a line or extend a line from my vanishing point up into the corner of the wall. That's very loose right now, so it's hard to tell exactly where it is. Let it go all the way up. Okay, feels pretty good. Should kind of correspond to this line. And now vanishing point, upper corner, off the page, somewhere below the corner line. Perfect. Looks good to me. That's close enough to where I want it to be. That's a good approximation there, and that's because we use some of our measuring tools that we've been using all along. So now what we can do is come back in, and I'm going to take a ruler, and very carefully I'm going to make sure that I have what appears to be the now this is an approximation, but as close as possible to a true horizontal. So we don't want any funky wobbly lines here, and notice that's already such a crisp line in comparison to what I had before. So as horizontal as we can make it, just kind of eyeballing off of the other horizontals that I already have, like the true edges of my paper. Beautiful. Okay, top line. I'm going to do true verticals, as true as I can get. Now we definitely don't want any wobbly lines here, so watch out. As straight as possible. And same over on this side. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do from here, as you can see, I have much clearer corners now, where before it was kind of loose and maybe a little bit wobbly. What I'm going to do is a couple things, but I'm going to make sure I know exactly where that vanishing point is, and I have a clear idea of that. I'm going to just wipe up some of those old dusty lines because I'm starting to get a little messy. And now what I'll do from this pivot point, my vanishing point, through this corner, I'm going to extend a line that goes all the way out toward us. So it starts here. I'm going to push a little harder as we zoom out toward us. And so that is going to be the line. I know it's weird right now between floor and the left side wall. Now I'm going to do exactly what I just did across all corners of this room. So you can go ahead and kind of follow along too. I'll speed this up in the video. All right, guys, so as you can see, a couple things happened there. One, the lines all got tidied up, perfect. You can erase some of your messier, scratchier, really light, sketchy lines, which you can see in mine because we don't need those anymore. But most importantly, the important thing that you need to remember is that we now have a back wall, we have side walls, ceiling, and a floor is what you've given yourself. Now this is really important, and I see a lot of students forget this part, or in the beginning it's hard to imagine what's happening here with this back wall. But this measuring point is really, it's imaginary. It's not in our image, but it's the pivot point that we use to make all of these things feel accurate. So just remember that in the end, we're going to keep this kind of light, and you can even erase some of these measuring lines, that crosshair X shape in the middle. Where they become really important and where you absolutely need them and where you see them in real life is where they have gone from that measuring point or vanishing point through the corner of the room, and now it's creating the edges of the walls and floors. I hope that makes sense. It'll make even more sense as we keep working our way further through the drawing. All right, so I just erased some double doors, so I'm just going to kind of bring those back lightly and loosely. All right, and just for the sake of keeping these videos a little bit on the short side and not having one huge file on my computer, I'm going to break this up into the first 10 minutes right here. That's a great place to be in the beginning of your perspective drawing, and we're going to dive right into some of adding more details into the drawing next. Accurate. So first thing I'm going to look at is over on the left side over here, there's kind of an inset area that recedes into the wall, and then there are doors there. That's kind of a tricky thing for first-time drawers, for anyone really. And so let's take a look at that. Now this is the edge of my page right here. I see a vertical line. So the edge of the floor comes out, and there's a vertical line that pops up just about, less than an inch into your page probably. So that's where we have one side of the wall that comes out and sticks out closer to us, and then the rest of the wall goes inset and comes inside right here and tucks behind it. That'll become visible here in just a second. Now, I'm just approximating using my best judgment of how far in that little jogged area is. So it sets back enough that we can see a door. So I'm going to jump forward a little ways. So again, use your best approximation as well, but probably somewhere around here. And I'm going to draw another vertical line up. This is, again, just using my best judgment right now. Now you could do some things like measure. So for example, from the edge of my paper into this line that I just made, I could take that width and then double it. And so that space is wider than this space back here. I'm going to check that in my image, my source image. And I get actually about the same thing, so that's a good sign. It's not perfect, but it's close enough for me right now. Now once that's kind of light and loose, or right now it's light and loose, we're going to take a ruler and just clean those lines up, try to make them as vertical and true as we can. Have one that's leaning just a little bit. Those leans start to really get you, so make sure that ruler is lining up parallel to the edge of your paper. Can't stress enough how important that is, for sure. Okay. Leave that just like that for now. Now eventually we're going to have to do some things to make that feel like it goes inside and tucks away back there, but we'll deal with that in just a little bit. Now let's look into doors. So these are the double doors. I'm going to come in and clean up those lines a little bit with the ruler, just like we did with everything else so far. So just making sure that feels as horizontal as we possibly can. Looks like mine's leaning a little bit, but just for the sake of time, we're going to roll with it here. Okay, as vertical as we can. So those are my wider double doors, as vertical as we can get. Okay, now in this image, if you notice, all of the doors are about the same height, which is true of a lot of, homes, hospitals, school buildings. All the doors would be a standard height, 7 feet tall or whatever it happens to be. So because of that, what you can do is you can take your double door, the top of the line, and what I've done is I've extended that line. Now keep this light. I'm drawing it kind of dark so you can see it, but I'm extending that line to the left side wall, to the right side wall right here. Now that you've done that, you can take your vanishing point and connect the dots between vanishing point and where that horizontal line hits the edge of this wall. I know that seems weird, but what I'm going to do is take a line, cross from here to where that line hits the wall, and we're going to extend it up. Now, I'll show you why I'm doing that here in just a second. So vanishing point, horizontal bar that crosses that wall, and now lightly, keep this light because we can erase it later. We're going to let that just go until it rolls off the page. What that just gave you is, if you had a door here in the foreground, the top of that door would be on this slant and it would be this high. And if you have a door way back here on this wall, Still the same angle because it goes back to the vanishing point, but it's only going to be this high. So it gives you the sense of things receding in space backwards or coming toward us forward. And I know that seems weird now. It's a little abstract, but we'll pull that out even further here in just a minute. So let's take a look at things like doorways. The door in the foreground is pretty huge. So I'm going to draw the outer edges of the molding of that door. And that first edge of the door, and this is the left side of our first door in the image, comes out just a little ways, like right around here. So I'm going to put a little marker for where I think that is. And then the right side of that molding, let's see, just pops in about somewhere in here. At least to me, that's where I'm seeing it. So I'm going to lightly sketch these lines out as vertical as I can make them, keeping in mind it's never going to be perfect just yet. Going to be a little wobbly. All right, so that feels like a gigantor door, right? It's kind of huge, which is exactly the way it should feel right now, because this door is maybe 2 feet in front of us, and these doors are maybe 50, 60 feet back in space. So notice that size difference. This is 70 feet tall. This is 7 feet tall, but in our drawings, they feel very skewed from each other, and that's a good thing. That's going to give us that sense of realistic depth. Now that we've sketched that in, let's clean up those vertical lines as parallel as we can make this vertical to the edges of our paper. Straight line down, parallel as I can get it. Straight line down. Okay, cleaning up some of my dirty mess from before. Nice. So next thing we have to do is just figure out how thick we want, say, the molding to be around the door. So this is where we get into more details, and the details aren't bad, but they can be a little tricky because you just don't know where to start. So what I'm going to do is say, how thick do I want this molding to be? It's kind of a thin strip of wood, maybe about something like this. So I'm just lightly sketching how thick I want that molding to be first, and I'm just freehanding it. But what I'll want to do is come in and actually connect the dots from where I sketched my line. I want to draw that line back to my vanishing point. Now there's no need for me, well actually, I am going to continue this line all the way back because that same line can be used to figure out the molding on any doors that we have zooming back into the distance there. So that'll be helpful actually. Now when it comes to the flat edge of the molding over here, we're going to have to eyeball some things. So how thick do I want the edge of the molding to be right here? I'm just going to say about this thick. And now I'm going to drop a vertical line down. Just using your best judgment for how thick you think the molding should be. So we've got that edge. Now, where those two actually meet, most of the time molding on doors will have a 45-degree angle. So I'm just going to connect the dots between this corner up to the corner of the molding right there. And then back here, same sort of thing. Only difference is this might appear a little thinner because it's zoomed out away from us in space. So now, a little bit of a thinner vertical line, still trying to maintain that true vertical. Okay, and that's only going to continue down to this line right here. Doesn't go all the way off the page. Same thing, 45-degree angle there, and now that actually starts to look like that door has been framed and has some trim around it. I don't think molding's quite the right word there. Maybe it is. Okay, so you got that door frame. Now to make this look three-dimensional, right now it at least looks like it's going back in space, which is good. But to really make it 3D and like the door is properly inset into the wall, I've got some really good tricks for you. This should be good. So to make this actually appear 3D, what we would do is right here in this corner of the wall, you're going to draw a flat, totally horizontal line. Now, you can use your ruler for that, but just make sure you don't want to be twisting this sideways. You want to go as flat and level as you can possibly get, and a little bit of a horizontal line. Now, how far should that go in? That depends on how much you want the door to appear like it's recessed into the wall. For me, I'm going to say, actually, that I think will work right in there. So I want it to be definitely wider than that strip of trim, but I don't want it to be like half of this distance or anything. So somewhere in there is perfect for me. Now that I have an idea of where I want that line, I'm going to go for as true of a vertical as I can get, which my verticals actually, I'm already able to tell that they're a little off from each other, but this is the best we can do when we're working from home. We don't have all the T-squares and, architectural tools we might need. Okay, so we dropped a line downhill. Now that line doesn't have to come all the way off the page, but if you made it go off the page, that's okay for right now, because what happens is where this trim, the inner edge of this trim, hits the bottom wall, we're going to carry a flat line, a horizontal line over, and that's what makes this look like it sets back into the wall. So let me show you. I'm going to erase this little diagonal, and now check that out. It looks like our door, we're coming down the wall here, and then it curves inset like that, recessed door pocket. So from there, where the actual door, now this is the face of the door right here, and we'll put like a handle on it eventually. But from this point and this point, you can connect to your vanishing point. Almost seems too steep, but it's got to be right because the vanishing point does not lie. Okay, and then vanishing point to this inner point on the door, and now we're just going to go all the way to where that's going to hide behind our trim. Check that out. So just for the sake of, I think, making this stand out a little better, I'm going to show you what typically it would look like in real life, is that this would cast a shadow underneath it because we're looking up at this door trim. So hopefully that helps to make a little more sense of this. Just shading this a little bit. You guys don't have to shade this, but just to show that little bit of depth. And doesn't that look nice, like that door is a little more three-dimensional? So it's not difficult. You just kind of have to know the steps to take on this. And there are a lot of steps. So once you've done this a few times, it'll make a lot more sense. When you're first learning this, feel free to pause these videos, take your time. It can be really confusing, I think. 100%. So I'm just going to start drawing a few of these doors, and what I'll do is probably speed through the video just to show you, the process of how I would start to locate these. But something very important to keep in mind, and you don't have to make the exact same number of doors as are in the original image. I think there's this big one, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 more. But the most important thing is that we make it appear as if each door gets skinnier and skinnier as they zoom away from us. The reason is they're also getting shorter and shorter. And that's the whole crux of this idea of perspective. We're getting really skewed space because we're looking at something, again, 7 feet tall, but that's like 60 feet down the hallway, and 7 feet tall that's right in front of our face. So as things zoom away, they appear to get thinner and also shorter. Everything kind of scales down gradually and exponentially too. And I think you'll see what I mean when I start to place these doors. But if I were to measure the second door in, which is going to be somewhere around here, I'm just doing a quick measurement, and that door, the whole door, is more like this width right here. It's crazy how much thinner it gets. So we're going to look at a space on the wall. I just measured it, and the space on the wall is about this thick. And then the actual opening of the door, like I said, is only about that wide. So that's our second door, and look at how much skinnier it becomes than this whole door right here. So this door is this wide. This one is only going to be a little wider than this whole recessed area. And et cetera, et cetera. As we move back in space, we're going to get slimmer and slimmer. All right, guys, so hopefully you can start to see these doors kind of developing and where they're going to eventually go into the distance. So I've mapped out how big these are going to be, but I haven't drawn them all yet. So I'm going to do that kind of off camera just to save some time. And we'll take a look at this once these doors are kind of locked in place just a little bit better.